myself all the things I love. Like I need a traffic jam to keep in touch. I can't focus on the words unless my hands are busy. I can't give up on the world or I will leave this city. And it's way too broad what I'm trying to say, but I write it down and let it go. And it's hard to know all the words I need to explain my heart in a single note.
Hello and welcome back to WayTooBroad. Podcast sabbatical book club. I don't remember the name. But I'm Hannah and I'm reading Ella Enchanted to you, the young adult novel by Gail Carson Levine, which is one of my favorite books in the entire world. If you haven't heard the first two remastered episodes, they're in the feed right before this one. This is the third episode. It starts with chapter 16. So we've read 1 through 15 up until now. This week is the first week during this like sabbatical period where I'm actually reading new content. So if you do happen to be someone who kept up with the book up until the sabbatical hit, this week, chapter 19 and 20 at the end are new. And then from here on out, all of the chapters will be new. We have 2 more weeks of the sabbatical. So we'll be finishing up the book. July 3rd will be when we finally finish the book. So I'm very excited. Things are really starting to heat up. I actually just finished recording the new chapters, and several exciting things happened. So I hope you enjoy. I also got a couple emails this week from our friend Sam, and I wanted to read one of them because it's Ella Enchanted related. I'm saving the other one until my friends are back. But this is a quick little one from Sam, who I'm so appreciative because I've been begging people to send me their thoughts about the whole Ella and Areta thing. And someone finally did, and it was Sam. I definitely agree that Ella's relationship with Areta could be romantic. This email is called Thoughts on Areta. However, I don't think I would have thought of it that way without prompting. It's my own bias, but I always lean towards viewing these things as close friendships. As much as I love and want more queer media, I also always want more media that doesn't show romance as the primary and truest kind of love. Deep friendships can also be loving and intimate, and I tend to lean into that interpretation unless something more explicitly suggests romance. Also, as someone who's often oblivious to others' interest, I find Ella being ignorant of Char's affection totally believable. As I type this, it also occurs to me that my stance in the first point may also be related to my personal obliviousness in the second. Anyway, I'm loving listening to you read the story and hearing your commentary on it. I fell behind on the chapters when they were at the end of the podcast, so this has been a great opportunity to catch up. Thank you so much, Sam, for sending your thoughts. Thank you for validating that this was a good idea. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Like, deep friendships can be very meaningful and intimate. I am also someone who never ever picked up on it when people were flirting with me as a young person. I mean, probably still to this day. Like, obviously I figured it out with my husband, but I did meet him on a dating site. So like, what else would he have been doing when he was talking to me? So yeah, I get that. I do get that. It's just, well, you'll see. There's just, I'm interested as the story goes on, and maybe send me a follow-up email if you continue to think that the amount of obliviousness that Ella shows is relatable to you or makes sense on the particular issue of like Char. But yeah, I mean, I really like the way the friendship between Ella and Areta is written as it is. But it also does feel like an opportunity for me, maybe, to do something else there. But maybe I'm just trying to make this story more interesting for Erin. I don't know. Yeah, so I think that's it. So we'll start with chapter 16. this week, and this is chapters 16 through 20, I think. And then we'll start next week with chapter 21. So please enjoy. Have a beautiful week. And I will talk to you next week. Bye. Sir Stephen was indeed talkative. He had a small manor in Frel, a wife, 4 daughters, and 2 hounds. The hounds were the joy of his life. Not his daughters. Smarter than pigs, cats, and dragons all rolled together, he said. No. I have had a dog that was like 2 different kinds of hounds, and he was very sweet. He wasn't very smart. As we rode, he recounted tale after tale of their bravery and cleverness. When do you think we'll reach the giants? I asked when he stopped for breath. 3 days, I should think. The day of the wedding, and we might arrive after it ended. Can we go any faster? I don't need much sleep. Maybe you don't, and I'm eager to get back to those ogres, but the horse needs his rest. We'll go as fast as he'll take us. I kicked the horse, hoping to spur him on, and hoping Sir Stephen wouldn't notice. Sir Stephen didn't, and the horse didn't either. Sir Stephen, it's a really hard name to say. Sir Stephen began a tale about exhausted horses and a charge against a dragon. When he finished, I hastily changed the subject. Do you like serving under the prince? Some might not fancy answering to a youngster, he said, but I'm a toiling knight. What's that? Not so noble I can't curry my own horse, not so greedy I have no time to serve my king. Is Char a toiling prince? That's a good description of him, little lady. I never saw a lad, page or prince, so eager to do a thing right. According to Sir Stephen, Char was almost as wonderful as the hounds. He wasn't only eager to learn, he did learn, and quickly. He was kind. They had departed Frel late because of his kindness. The cart of a fruit and vegetable seller had overturned in the road ahead of them. When the seller began screeching that everyone would trample his precious tomatoes and melons and lettuces, Char had us right the cart. Then he spent the better part of an hour on his hands and knees rescuing vegetables. As he rescued me. I mentally rolled my eyes there. You're a long mile prettier than a grape or a squash, and you needed a long mile less rescuing. I never caught an ogre so neatly before. I turned the conversation away from me and back to Char. He's smart and he's steady, the prince is, Sir Stephen continued. Too steady, maybe. Too serious, maybe. He laughs when there's something to laugh at, but he doesn't play enough. He's been with the king's counselors too much. Sir Stephen was quiet for a rare moment. He laughed more in a morning with you than in 2 weeks with us. He should frolic with the young folks more. They're on their best behavior with a prince, he turned his head, except for you, little lady. I was alarmed. Did I behave badly? You acted natural, not like a courtier. Manners mistress would consider me an utter failure. I smiled. We spent our nights at inns. The first night I retired to my room soon after dinner. I set my Aguilin wolf on the table next to my bed so he could protect my sleep. Then I opened my magic book. I always say that wrong. On the verso was a letter from Hattie to her mother. On the recto, one to the same lady from Olive. I read Hattie's first. Dear Mama, is not my penmanship much improved? I've been practicing my flourishes. I just want to say, I don't remember if she notes it, but the spelling in this letter is atrocious. The words may be harder to read, and writing mistress despairs of my spelling, but when you stand away from the page, is the result not charming? Sir Peter's daughter has vanished. Madame Edith says she was called away in the night. However, I suspect that Madame Edith is lying, and that Ella has run off. There was always something devious and deceitful about her, although her father is such a charming, rich man. My new tresses are divine, and I emerged among the other girls again 2 days ago when they arrived. I suspect my locks may have vanished with Ella, a heartless prank to play on me, who always treated her with kindness. But I still hope she has come to no harm and has not been eaten by ogres, or captured by bandits, or caught on fire, or fallen into bad company, as I often imagine. The rest of the letter recounted the compliments Hattie had received on a new gown. She ended with a farewell and the largest flourish of all. Hattie! It's like swoops on every letter, including the tops of the T's, so they look like F's, and at the end of the E. That's why it says that thing about large flourishes. The recto. Dear Mother, I have been feeling poorly all week. I have headaches. Oh, spelling is even worse on this one. Especially when I read. You always say too much reading is bad for the eyes, but writing mistress won't listen. She called me little more than an idiot and said there will be no hop for me when I am grown if I don't learn to read better. Hattie says Ella was bad to leave, but I think she was bad not to tack me too. Ella did everything Hattie told her to. I wish people did what I want. It's not fair. Your miserable daughter, Olive. The whole page was full of blots and crossouts. Each letter was formed with a wobbly hand, as though the writer didn't know how to hold a pen. Poor Olive, truly. Her letter was followed by a sad tale about the genie in Aladdin's lamp. He had been forced by Aladdin's false uncle, the magician, to take up residence in the lamp and had been given power to grant everyone's wishes but his own. Before he was captured, he had been in love with a goose girl. The genie spent his years in the lamp longing for her and wondering whether she'd married someone else, whether she'd grown old, whether she'd died. I closed the book, weeping a little. I wasn't confined to a lamp, but I too was not free. The size of things began to grow shortly after we started out on our third morning. In the past, objects far away had always appeared smaller than objects close by, but now the old rule stood on its head. The trees near us were dwarfed by the trees in the distance ahead. At 10 o'clock, I saw a pumpkin as wide as I was tall. At 11, we passed one as big as a carriage. At noon, we saw a giant. He was building a stone wall out of boulders. It was already twice my height, and I shuddered to think of the livestock it would pen. When the giant saw us, he trumpeted his pleasure. "Oayaki honk," he called, dropping a rock and thundering toward us, his mouth open wide in a huge smile of welcome. Our horse reared in fright, and I struggled to keep my seat till the giant reached down and touched the beast gently on his muzzle. He quieted instantly, and even nuzzled against the giant's thigh. Oh boy, we've got more made-up language here. Okay. Ayup, ai u kubi ub paipeau, I said. It meant hello in Abdegi. We've come to attend the wedding of Uaxi's daughter, I added in Kyrian. But are we too late? You are just in time. I'll lead you there. The farm was 2 hours away. Kupuduk, the giant, strolled next to our horse. Is Uaxi expecting you? He said. No, I answered. Will she mind? Mind? She won't be able to thank you enough for coming. Giants love strangers. He paused. And friends, too. Lots of friends and strangers will be there. We traveled in silence for a while, with Kupuduk smiling down at us. Are you tired? Hungry? He asked presently. We're fine, Sir Stephen said, although I was starving. Everyone is polite except Giant. We say when we're hungry. Never mind, there's lots to eat at a giant's farm. Uaxi's house was visible an hour before we reached it. That's her house, Kupuduk announced, pointing. It's nice, isn't it? Enormously nice. Hugely nice, Sir Stephen said. Don't you think so, lass? I nodded. My heart began to pound so hard I thought it would catapult me backwards off the horse. Soon I might find Lucinda. Soon I might be free. That's the end of chapter 16. And we're going to continue chapter 17. I don't know if I said, but I think I'm going to try to read 3 chapters this week as a little treat. I tightened my grip on Sir Stephen's waist. Do you think to be my corset? He complained. As we approached, Uaxi opened the door to look for new guests. We were still a distance from the house, so I was able to see her whole. Close up, giants were whatever part was nearest. A skirt, a bodice, a trouser leg, or a face. She was 3 times as tall as a grown human, but no wider. Everything about her was long and narrow. Head, torso, arms, legs. However, when she saw us, the long oval of her face changed. She smiled so broadly that her cheeks became peach round, and her eyes behind her spectacles became slits of delight. Okay, I actually also want to say about giants, this is Hannah, not the book. I don't think I've ever come across another imagining of giants where they're very friendly and lovely, sweet people, except for Ella Enchanted, and I think it's really nice. Ai, Kubi, Scree, Degu. She lifted Sir Stephen off the horse and then saw me. 2 people! Uayagi honk to both of you. Welcome. The wedding will begin in a little while. Udabi, she called to her daughter, the bride. Look who's here. The daughter, surrounded by friends, waved to us. I can't stay, madam. I just brought this young lady to find her father. Her father? Sir Peter of Frel, I said. Uaxi beamed. So this is his daughter. He never said a word. She turned toward the house. Where is he? I'll find him. He'll be so glad you're here. Please don't, I said quickly. I want to surprise him. Surprise! I love surprises. I won't tell. Sir Stephen mounted his horse. I must go. Goodbye, Ella, madam. But how can you leave the party? You didn't even come in. Sir Stephen looked up at Euaxie's long face, even longer in distress. Madam, it grieves me to go, he said. Only a matter of the utmost urgency could take me away. He winked at me. Please don't be sad. I'll only be able to comfort myself if I believe you are happy. Euaxie smiled through tears. At least let me give you food for your journey. She hurried into the house, calling behind her, I'll only be a moment. Toiling knights are also diplomats, I said. When we have to be. I'll tell the prince I left you in large, good hands. Euaxie returned with a hamper from which protruded a chicken wing as big as a turkey. Sir Stephen galloped off, and Euaxie hurried away, diverted by new guests. I entered the house and joined the throng. I could see nothing except the people, or parts of them, nearest me, a group of gnomes arguing about mining techniques, and the skirts of two giantesses. How would I manage to find one human-sized fairy? The only clue would be her tiny feet, and that would be hidden by her skirts. Giants crowded around a table so tall that I could walk beneath it without bumping my head. On the other side, I came to a stool loaded with food for the small people. While I searched, I might as well eat. I filled my plate, a saucer as big as a platter, with a slice of potato, 3-foot-long string beans, and a balloon-sized cheese puff. It was impossible to eat this food and walk. With a napkin draped over my arm and trailing on the floor, I made my way to one of the giant pillows that lined the walls of the dining hall. Couches for humans, elves, and gnomes. Giant pillows. Couches for humans, elves, and gnomes. I would watch the crowd while I dined. The silverware was too big. I looked around to see how others were managing. Some struggled with knives and forks the size of axes and shovels. Some stared at their meal in perplexity. And some dug in with bare hands. The string beans and potato slice were easy. I held them in both hands and ate. Not so the cheese puff. It oozed when I bit in, and half my face was covered with cheese. As I cleaned myself, a gong rang out. The deep booming sound resonated in my chest. The wedding would begin soon. I followed the crowd as it trooped outdoors. Unconfined by walls, it thinned, and I was able to take in more of the guests at a glance. And there was Father, only a few yards ahead of me, also searching. I stood still and allowed several giants to separate us. Then I hurried to stay close behind them. In their midst, I slipped past Father. After half an hour, we reached a cleared field where stands had been erected for giants and smaller peoples. A few humans had arrived and seated themselves. I slipped behind a tall man where I would be well concealed. I was close to the aisle and in a good position to scrutinize the feet of new arrivals. The ladies had to lift their skirts as they climbed. At each step up, a boot appeared or a slipper peeped out. I counted them off. Ordinary foot, ordinary, large, quite large. The benches were almost full. Father arrived and seated himself far from me. Ordinary foot, small but not small enough. Ordinary, ordinary, ordinary. Very tiny, very tiny. The two lady fairies, accompanied by a gentleman, who was surely a fairy too, squeezed into the row only 2 below mine. The gentleman was stoop-shouldered, and one of the ladies was fat, but the other satisfied every cherished idea of a fairy. Tall and graceful, with huge eyes, skin as unblemished as satin, lips as red as pomegranate seeds, and cheeks the color of early sunset. The stands were too crowded. I couldn't approach them, but I'd watch to make sure they didn't leave. The wedding began. The bride and groom came into the field holding hands. She carried a sack, and he carried a hoe. Each wore trousers and a white smock. I also like this wedding ceremony. I also just think it's nice and very unique. It really shows how much thought was put into all these cultures. At the sight of them, a roar rose from the giant stands. Giants screeched, moaned, grunted, and hummed that the bride was beautiful, the groom was handsome, they would be healthy for long and forever, and this was the happiest day in anybody's memory. Aside from enormous smiles, the couple ignored them and began to plant a row of corn. He prepared the ground, and she dropped in seeds from her sack and covered them with moist earth. As they finished, clouds rolled in and a gentle rain fell, although the sky had been clear when the ceremony started. The giants spread their arms and tilted their heads to receive the drops. I looked down at the fairies. The 2 plain ones were smiling, but the beautiful one was rapturous. She seemed to be singing, and tears rolled down her cheeks. The giants pantomimed their lives together. They farmed and built a house and brought a series of older and older children from the audience into the imaginary home, and then more babies for grandchildren. It ended when they lay down in the grass to signify their deaths together. I just teared up a little bit. Then they sprang up. Benches were overturned as giants poured onto the field to hug them and exclaim over the ceremony. I stayed in my place, marveling. These giants were lucky to see their lives laid out so sweetly before them. Did the pantomime help? Did it stop ogres from eating you? Did it prevent droughts and floods? Did it keep you from dying before your children were grown? Except for the beautiful fairy and a number of giants, everyone started back to the house, including Father. I stayed to watch the fairy, hoping, praying that she would reveal herself to be Lucinda. She pushed her way to the newlyweds through a crowd of relatives and well-wishers. In a few minutes, the giants drew away from her. The bride and groom clutched each other. Both were crying. Euaxia appeared to be pleading. She crouched before the fairy so that their faces were level, and her eyes never left the fairy. The fairy stroked Euaxi's arm sympathetically, but Euaxi flinched at the touch. Finally, the giants turned and walked slowly back to the house. The fairy watched them go, smiling blissfully. This had to be Lucinda. There was every sign of it. She'd probably bestowed a gift on the newlyweds that was as gladly received as mine had been. "Lady," I called, my heart pounding. She didn't hear me. As I spoke, she vanished, without even a puff of smoke or a shimmer in the air to mark her departure. Now I knew for certain she was Lucinda, the only fairy in the world who would disappear in plain view. "Fool," I called myself. "Idiot." I should have spoken to her the moment I suspected who she was. She could be in Aortha by now, or soaring over an ocean. I returned to the house and found that the giants had grown somber, although the small people were still merry. I wandered through the hall, munching on this and that, while watching out for Father. Where should I go next? How could I continue my quest? The other fairies might still be here, and might know where Lucinda had gone. Quickening my pace, I began to search, and in a few minutes I saw them, standing together and looking as sorrowful as the giants. When I had almost reached them, Lucinda materialized in their midst, still smiling. I pretended to be utterly absorbed in the problem of cracking a gigantic walnut I had taken from the banquet stool. "I won't waste my breath telling you how wrong it is to disappear and reappear as you do," the gentleman fairy told Lucinda. "I hope you don't plan to do it again in the middle of this crowd." "No, Cyril. How could I leave the scene of my greatest triumph?" Her voice was musical. I smelled lilacs. "What horror did you visit on this poor couple?" he asked. "No horror. A gift." "What gift, then?" the other lady fairy asked. A little aggressive, sorry. "Ah, Claudia, I gave them companionship in felicitous union." Cyril raised his eyebrows. "How did you accomplish that?" "I gave them the gift of being together always. They can go nowhere without each other. Isn't it splendid?" The walnut almost slipped from my hands. "It's frightful," Cyril said. "What's wrong with it?" Lucinda thrust her head forward defiantly. "They'll hate each other within a month," Claudia answered. Lucinda laughed, a pretty tinkling sound. "No, they won't. They'll love each other more than ever." Cyril shook his head. "If they argue, and all loving couples argue, they'll never be alone to recollect themselves, to find ways to forgive each other. You know nothing about it. Not all couples argue, and these two won't. They're too much in love." "Imagine he bites his nails and she doesn't like it," Claudia said. "Or she rocks back and forth when she talks and he doesn't like it. They will never have any respite from the quality they don't like. It will grow and grow until all he sees is her rocking and all she sees is him nail biting." "My gift has nothing to do with nails and rocking. It has to do with the heart, which loves to be near that which it loves." I forgot my walnut and stared at the mad fairy. "Visit again in a year," Cyril challenged. "You'll see what the heart loves." "From now on, all giants will elope," Claudia said, "rather than risk a wedding with you as a guest." "I shall return, and I'll be right, and they'll think, 'What are you staring at?' I mean you, wench." Lucinda whirled on me. That's the end of chapter 17. So last chapter for this week is chapter 18. "She's probably another supplicant," Cyril said, "come to beg you to take away a gift you gave her at birth." "Don't turn this one into a squirrel. I can't bear to watch it." Claudia grasped Lucinda's wrist. "You can't know squirrels lead charming, contented lives. I'm sure she prefers to be a human maiden." "A squirrel?" I had to keep her from making a squirrel of me. "Abensa eke ubasu enoxi akiria?" I said. I wondered if she spoke Aorthan. I had just told her I didn't understand Kyrian. Lucinda's expression softened. "I'm sorry, my sweet," she answered in Aorthian. I asked why you were staring at me. "You're so beautiful." Let her think me simple. "What a darling child. What is your name, dear?" "Elle." This was Ella in Aorthian. "Beauty isn't important, Elle. Only what's in your heart is important. Do you understand that?" "Yes. I'm sorry I stared." "No need to be sorry, sweet child. You did nothing wrong." Her smile was dazzling. "Thank you, lady," I curtsied. "You may call me Lucinda." She lifted her chin. "They would not have me say so," she indicated to Cyril and Claudia, "but I am a fairy." "A fairy? That's why you're so beautiful." My friends are shopkeepers, Cyril said firmly, also an Eorthian. We sell shoes. For tiny feet, Lucinda laughed. For children, Claudia amended. Oh, I said, I don't need shoes, but I need help. Magical help. Can you help me, Lady Lucinda? You don't need her help, Claudia said. You should leave her while you still may. I'd be delighted to help you. You see, Claudia, they don't, you see, Claudia, they do need us. Tell me, Elle. I want more metal, if you please, lady. Whatever anyone tells me to do, I do. Whether I want to or not. I've always been this way, but I wish I weren't. The maiden is naturally obedient, Cyril said. Isn't that one of your gifts? And she doesn't like it. I knew how sweet you were the moment I saw you. Obedience is a marvelous gift, Elle. Sometimes I give the gift to little babies. I certainly won't take it away from you. Be happy to be blessed with such a lovely quality. But, I began, then stopped as Lucinda's order gripped me. My mood changed, and I smiled joyously. The curse had been turned into a blessing. Thank you, lady, I said. Thank you. I said, almost forgetting to speak Eorthian. I kissed her hand. There, you don't have to thank me. You only need to see it in the proper light. She patted my head. Now run along, Elle. My first order in my new state, I was delighted to obey. I rushed off. I knew I was happy only because I'd been ordered to be, but the happiness was absolute. I still understood why I had always hated Lucinda's gift, but I was glad nonetheless. I imagined future commands, awful ones that would kill me, and I glowed at the idea of obeying them. For the first time since Mother had died, I was free of fear. I would embrace whatever happened. I felt as light as a cloud. I decided to find Father. If anyone would have commands for me, he would. I found him outside Euaxie's house, climbing into his carriage. He turned when he heard my voice, and I received a shock. He was actually pleased to see me. I had never before seen him smile without guile. Smile without guile. Rhymes. Ella, my dear. I didn't care if he was angry. I ran away from finishing school. He laughed. I knew the lass had courage. And are you a lady now or still a clumsy cook's helper? How shall I show you? Curtsy for me. I swept him my finest. Excellent, all his cunning returned. You are pretty enough. Foolish of me never to have thought of you. All his cunning returned. You are pretty enough. Foolish of me never to have thought of you. Get into the carriage, Eleanor. I trust you will not damage your gown this time. Shouldn't we say goodbye to Euaxie? I asked, climbing in. She won't miss us. She's too heartsore over a gift from a fairy. He frowned. They say 3 were here, and I never saw a hair of them. The carriage began to move. I didn't care where we were headed. You're just in time to put your training to use, Father said. Only tell me what I must do. His eyebrows rose. This is more transformation than I had hoped for. He was silent for a long time. I began to feel drowsy. I am a ruined man. His voice startled me. What? I sold an estate that didn't belong to me. The gnomes who bought it have found me out. When we reach Frel, I shall have to repay them, and it will take all I own. I shall have to sell our manor, our furniture, the carriage, and I shall have to sell you, in a manner of speaking. You must marry so that we can be rich again, so that he can be rich again. Yes, Father, gladly. When? I understood the monstrousness of this plan, but nothing could lessen my joy at the prospect of obeying. What did you say? I said, yes, Father, gladly. When? You ask when, not to whom? You're so anxious to wed? No, Father, only to do your bidding. What did they do to you at that finishing school? No wonder you ran off. When we reached our manor, Father stayed outside to speak with the coachman, while I hurried inside to find Mandy. She was scrubbing vegetables, and a parrot perched on her shoulder. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Ella, my sweet, the parrot squawked in Gnomic. Chuck, echo de Chuck. I wished she'd never stop squeezing me. I wished I could spend the rest of my life as a child, being slightly crushed by someone who loved me. Father spoke from the doorway. I shall be away from home this evening. However, tomorrow we shall entertain. Elvish mushrooms will arrive from the market. They're a delicacy, Mandy. Serve them as a first course for Lady Eleanor and her guest. What guest? Mandy asked after Father left. My husband, perhaps. My husband, perhaps. I'm so glad, Mandy. She dropped the pot she'd been washing. It fell into the wash tub, but rose back into her hands a moment later. You're what? The parrot squawked again. Chalk. Mandy had named him Chalk, after his favorite word, which was an exclamation in Gnomic meaning, oh, or oh my, or even eek. In this case, I'm sure it meant eek. My husband. Father has lost all his money. I must marry so he can be rich again. "This tops all," she stormed. "What is he thinking about, marrying off a chick like you? And why are you glad about it?" I think she means chick like baby chicken, not like the colloquial chick meaning woman. Not just glad, I couldn't find the right word. Ecstatic to do it. If it will please them both, my father and my new husband. Mandy cupped my chin in her hands and examined my face. "What happened to you, child?" "I met Lucinda, and she made me happy to be obedient." "No, baby, no, honey," Mandy blanched. "She didn't. It's much better this way. I don't feel cursed anymore. Don't be sad," I smiled. "See, I'm giving you an order. If you obeyed it, you'd be happy too." She turned you from half puppet to all puppet. I'm supposed to be glad about that?" I didn't answer. While Mandy stood dumbstruck, I looked around the kitchen, greeting every familiar object. Finally, she muttered, "Lucinda's up to new tricks." Then she spoke to me. "I'm starved. Are you ready for dinner, love?" We supped together in the kitchen, only the two of us, and the parrot, because father had dismissed the other servants. "He must like my cooking too much to get rid of me," Mandy told me over cold chicken wings and warm bread. She spoke no more of my new obedience, but it must have been on her mind, because she changed towards me. She stopped being bossy. I supposed she wouldn't give Lucinda the satisfaction of using my new state. However, Lucinda wouldn't have known, and I was denied the joy of obeying. The next afternoon, we prepared the broth for a fish stew with wild onions, dinner for my guest. I was slicing the onions when a boy brought the mushrooms father had promised. Their carton bore the label Torlin Carew. Carew meant mushrooms, but I didn't know the meaning of Torlin. Examining the box, Mandy frowned. "Sweet, would you look up that Torlin word for me?" "Torlin, noun, justice, fairness," I read in my dictionary. "Torlin Carew, justice mushrooms, induce feelings of liking and love in those who eat them, used in elvish courts of law to settle civil disputes." "I'll Torlin Carew him." "It doesn't matter," I said. "It matters to me." Mandy yanked on her boots and flung her cloak over her shoulders. "I'll be back soon. Please keep the broth from coming to grief." I stirred the soup and thought about our dinner guest. I would be glad to marry him. But would I be glad afterward? He might be cruel or dull-witted or mad. Father wouldn't concern himself with my happiness, only with his own. If he were terrible, Mandy could order me to be contented anyway. Or perhaps I could persuade my husband to issue the command. Chalk landed on my shoulder and pecked lightly at my ear. "Chalk! Junka Azush! Lovely, an order!" I had to kiss him. I turned my head and managed to kiss a wing as he flew to perch on a high shelf. "Jumika Ajush!" he squawked again. I'm really slurring these words. I approached the shelf and extended my hand. The bird obligingly hopped on. I brought him close to my face, but before I could touch my lips to a feather, he flew away to the top of a window shutter. I ran for the chair so I could climb up to him, but as soon as I was high enough, he flew off. When Mandy returned half an hour later, I had a spoon for stirring the broth in one hand and a strainer for catching chalk in the other, and I was breathless from running from one to the other. The curse must have known I was trying to obey because my complaints hadn't started. I wasn't dizzy or faint or in pain, but I was weeping. Chalk wouldn't let me obey and be happy. "Ella, what's a foot?" "A wing! What's a wing?" I corrected, starting to laugh through my tears. "Chalk won't let me kiss him." "Don't kiss the filthy creature," Mandy ordered, releasing me. "He did it again," I said. "Don't kiss him." "Puak etch judgment adush," I told Chalk. Puak etch judgment adush, I told Chalk, hoping he'd adopt my addition. I repeated it. Puak etch judgment adush. He liked it, and then he says it again. I'm not even going to try. Much better. The new version was "Don't kiss me." I'd be delighted every time he said it. After we put the kitchen to rights, we began to replace the Torlin Carew with innocent mushrooms. Maybe I should eat the elvish ones. I don't want you hoodwinked even if you don't care. Father came into the kitchen. "How's our dinner faring?" he asked genially. Then his face darkened. "Why aren't you using my mushrooms, Mandy?" She dropped a quick curtsy. "I don't know these elvish ones, sir. Maybe they're not fine enough." I didn't want her to be blamed. I told her to exchange them when she wasn't sure. "I sent you to finishing school so you wouldn't be a cook's helper, Ella. Use the elvish mushrooms, Mandy." And that's the end of chapter 18. So, chapter 19. My guest's name was known to me. He was Edmund, Earl of Warwick, uncle of Hattie's friend Blossom, the uncle whose marriage she feared might be... Okay, hold on. This is a long sentence. He was Edmund, Earl of Warwick, uncle of Hattie's friend Blossom, the uncle whose marriage she feared because it might cause her disinheritance. I suppose I should have been amused, but I was too lost in worry that the uncle would be as unpleasant as the niece. I waited for him in the study, a half-finished square of embroidery spread across my lap. I had barely seated myself when Father opened the door. "This is my daughter Eleanor," he said. The Earl bowed. I stood and curtsied. He was older than Father, with shoulder-length curled gray hair. His face was as thin as a greyhound's, with a long nose above a drooping mustache. He had a hound's sad eyes, too, brown with white showing above the lower lid and bags of skin below. I sat again, and he bent over my handiwork. "Your stitches are so neat and so tidy. My mother made the smallest stitches, too. You could barely see them." When he spoke, I saw teeth as small as a baby's, as though he'd never gotten a second set. I could picture the toddler Earl peeking into his mother's lap and flashing those wee pearls at her exquisite embroidery. What's the point of embroidery if you can't see it? That's me. I'm saying that. When we married, I would try to imagine that he was almost as young as his teeth. Leaving my side, he turned eagerly to Father. You could not hold such a position as I heard you express yesterday, my friend," the Earl said. "I hope you will explain yourself more fully." They were discussing punishments for bandits. The Earl thought that they should be shown mercy. Father believed that they should be treated harshly, put to death even, as an example. "If a bandit came here and made off with these valuables," Father waved his hands at the things he was in the process of selling, I'd be unnatural if I weren't enraged, and unnatural if I didn't act on my rage." Perhaps you couldn't help being angry," the Earl answered, "but you could certainly stop yourself from repaying one offense with another." I agreed with the Earl, and thought of an argument tailor-made for Father. "Suppose the thief didn't steal outright," I said. "Suppose he robbed you through deception. Would that thief deserve the same punishment as a bandit?" "A different case entirely," Father answered. "If I allowed a rogue to cheat me, I would deserve my fate. The knave would deserve some punishment, perhaps, but not a severe one. I would have been a gullible fool and not worthy of my wealth." The Earl nodded at me. "The cases are not so different," he said. "If an armed bandit made off with your possessions, you might be at fault for failing to protect your home. You might then also not be worthy of your wealth. Why should a robber sacrifice his life for your carelessness?" "Your logic is irrefutable, although its foundation isn't sound," Father said. "Two opponents are more than I can defend against. You have much in common with my daughter, Woloch. You are both soft-hearted." "Neatly done, Father. Now the Earl and I were a pair." Dinner was announced. Father led the way to the dining room, leaving the Earl to offer me his arm. The toiling crew appeared in our first course as a salad accompanying chilled quail eggs. "The mushrooms are elf-cultivated," Father said. "Our cook found them in the market, and I wanted to serve them to you, although, frankly, I detest fungi." "Try them, Ella." The mushrooms were bland. Their only flavor came from the lemon and sage Mandy had sprinkled on them. "I'm sorry, Sir Peter," the Earl said. "Mushrooms of every variety make me ill. I do enjoy quail eggs, however." The toiling crew's effect was rapid. By the time Mandy had whisked away my plate, I was wondering why I had thought the Earl resembled a hound when he was really quite handsome. I was liking Father, too. By the time we reached the soup course... That's a weird aside. That's a little creepy, right? These mushrooms make you fall in love. She's like, "Man, I really thought the Earl was handsome, and I was really liking my father, too." All right. Everything's fine. By the time we reached the soup course, I was calling the Earl Sweet Edmund in my thoughts and smiling at him after every spoonful. When the fish stew arrived, I suggested to Mandy that she give him an extra ladle. Father struggled not to laugh. Even without mushrooms, the Earl warmed to me. "Your daughter is charming, Sir Peter," he said during dessert. "I had no idea she'd grow up so well," he answered. "I must marry her off quickly, or I'll spend all my days looking over her beau." Beau with an X, like plural. Apparently. Back in the study after dinner, I drew my chair close to the Earl. Then I picked up my embroidery and tried to make my stitches so tiny that they were invisible. Edmund and Father were discussing King Gerald's campaign against the ogres. Father thought the King's knights weren't aggressive enough. The Earl believed them to be valiant and praiseworthy. Although I wanted to pay attention to my sewing, I couldn't. Every time the Earl or Father made a point, I nodded my agreement, even though they disagreed. Then I noticed that the room was chilly and settled back into my seat for warmth. "Perhaps we should build up the fire, Father. I should hate for our guest to catch cold." "I've never seen Ella so solicitous," Father said, adding a log to the fire. "She seems enamored of you, Woloch." "I am," I murmured. "What'd you say, dear?" Father asked. Why shouldn't he know how I felt? I wanted him to know. "I am enamored of him, Father," I said clearly, smiling at sweet Edmund. He smiled back. "This isn't the first time I've sampled Sir Peter's hospitality and his superior table, but you were never here before." He leaned toward me in his chair. "She was away at finishing school," Father said, "at Madame Edith's establishment in Jen." The time was ill spent, I said, if it delayed our meeting. Oh my God. Father blushed. My niece Blossom is at that school. Were you friends? The twirling crew had no influence over my memory, but I hated to say anything that would cause sweet Edmund pain. She is several years my senior. Blossom is almost 18, I think. You can't be very much younger. I was 15 in September. You're a child, he drew back in his seat. I couldn't bear it. Not such a child, I said. Mother married when she was 16. If I were to die young as she did, I should like to first to have lived and loved. This is so cringe. The Earl leaned toward me again. You have a loving heart. I see that. More woman than child. Oh, but. Father coughed and offered the Earl a brandy. Then he poured a small amount for me. Edmund touched his glass to mine. Oh my God, this guy. To the eagerness of youth, he said, may it always get what it longs for. Jesus Christ. When he left, he took my hand. Tonight I came to visit your father. May I return to see you? You can't. Sorry, this is grossing me out so much. Okay, you cannot come too soon, I said, or too often. Terrible. 15. When Mandy came to kiss me goodnight, I told her every word the Earl had said after I ate the mushrooms. Isn't he wonderful? I asked, wanting her to share my happiness. He sounds nice enough, she said grudgingly. Not like your father, the poisoner. But father is wonderful too, I protested. Yes, wonderful. She slammed the door as she left. I fell asleep telling myself stories in which I was the heroine and Edmund the hero, but my last conscious idea was an image of Prince Char when he'd caught the bridle of Sir Stephen's horse. His face had been close to mine. 2 curls had spilled onto his forehead. A few freckles dusted his nose, and his eyes said he was sorry for me to go. Mandy woke me when she finished her work for the night. I was hard to wake. The twirling crew still had me in their grip. I've been pondering, sweet. Think back. Did Lucinda give you a new gift when she made you happy about being obedient? She didn't say. I closed my eyes and pictured our meeting. She said, obedience is a marvelous gift. Be happy to be blessed with such a lovely quality. Why? It wasn't a new gift, just an ordinary command. Don't be happy about being obedient, Ella. Be whatever you want to feel about it. I was happy to obey. No, I wasn't. The room spun. I began to sob from relief mixed with sadness. I had been a begging puppy and a delighted slave, yet I hadn't felt cursed since I met Lucinda. Now I did again. After Mandy left me, I fell back to sleep and slept late. When I awoke, my head felt heavy enough to sink through the mattress. The mushrooms! I bolted up in bed, although my temples throbbed. Every moment of the evening before played in my memory. I pounded a pillow in rage at Father for making such a fool of me. I found a note on the table next to me. My dear Eleanor, you are a charming flirt. Wallach appeared at dawn to request my permission to declare his intentions to you. I dropped the letter, afraid to read on. If Father wrote I must marry the Earl, I would have to do it. If he came home and told me, I'd have to as well. But before he arrived, I could act. Mandy would tell me the letter's contents without making them in order. I found her in the hen house talking to the chickens. Up, Seki. A hen hopped off its roost and Mandy collected 3 eggs. Thank you. She went on to the next hen. Up, Echo. I need only 1 from you. To me, she said, do you fancy an omelet? I held the eggs while she read the letter. Sounds just like his lordship, she said when she finished, but it's safe to read. Father had rejected the Earl's suit. Upon close questioning, the Earl had confessed that most of his property had recently been consumed by fire. He wasn't rich enough for us. Poor Blossom. Her inheritance wouldn't be worth much, whether or not the Earl married. Father continued. I haven't time now to find another suitor, but never fear, I shall secure a rich husband for you yet. For now, however, my own neck will have to go into the noose instead of yours. There is a lady who will wed me, unless I miss my guess. I have gone to offer my hand, and to tell her that my heart is already hers. If my suit is successful, I shall send for you, so that you may become reacquainted with her. Reacquainted? Spare her any tidings of our poverty, although I flatter myself that there is not a shred of greed in Dame Olga's affection for me. As an accepted suitor or a disappointed lover, I shall see you soon. Until then, and always, your father. Dame Olga! Hattie would be my sister! Sorry, I kind of spoiled that one for you, but we all knew it was coming, right? Okay, chapter 20 will be the last one for this week, and here we go. Hold on, I gotta burp. Oh my god. I want to cut at least one of those out. Huh? Thanks. You just congratulated me for my burping. Dame Olga accepted Father's offer. In expressing her satisfaction at gaining a new daughter, she nearly suffocated me. "My darling, you must call me Mum. Mum Olga sounds so cozy." The wedding was to be in a week, as soon as arrangements could be made, and as soon as Hattie and Olive returned from finishing school. "They won't go back after the wedding," Mum Olga said. "They have learned enough. We shall stay here together, and you must all endeavor to lighten my desolation when my husband is away." Her eyes followed Father, who was crossing her parlor to gaze out the window. "And who will lift my desolation?" he asked, his back to her. A blush deepened the color of her rouged cheeks. She was besotted with him. He was all solicitude, all tender attention. She was kittenish, coy, and syrupy. I couldn't be with him for 5 minutes without wanting to scream. Fortunately, my presence was required very little. I was rarely invited to Mum Olga's residence, and Father kept her away from our manor, which was day by day being emptied to satisfy his debt. I cared little about the furniture, except for the fairy rug, which Mandy and I hid one afternoon when Father was with Mum Olga. We also rescued the best of Mother's gowns, because Mandy swore I would shoot up someday soon, and they would fit me. But we didn't care much, we didn't dare touch Mother's jewels. Father would have known if so much as a brass pin had been missing. Anyway, none of them equaled the necklace Hattie had taken from me. The week was quiet. I spent my days and nights mostly with Mandy. During the day, I helped her cook and clean. At night, I read from my fairy book, or we chatted by the kitchen fire. My only ventures outside were to the royal pastures to see Apple. I had hoped to meet Char there, but the grooms told me that he was still chasing ogres. The first time I visited Apple was the day after I returned to Frel. He stood under a tree, his attention fixed on 3 brown leaves that clung to a low branch. As I watched, he reared back, lifted his head, and reached for a leaf just beyond his grasp. In the bunched muscles of his back legs and the straining line from his hips to the tip of his fingers, he was splendid. If Agilin could have seen him, another pottery sculpture would have been born. I whistled. He whirled and stared at me. I held out a carrot and whistled again. A song about mermaids, Apple's distant cousins. Isn't that fun? When he saw the treat, he smiled and trotted to me, both hands extended. Soon he let me pet his mane, and came when I whistled, although no food was in sight. It wasn't long before the sight of me inspired as much happiness as a carrot. I began to confide in him. His wide-eyed attention was an invitation, and his trick of cocking his head to one side while I spoke made me feel that every word was a revelation, although he understood none of it. Hattie hates me and makes me do things, never mind why. Olive likes me, which is hardly an advantage. Mum Olga is odious. You and Mandy are the only ones who love me, and you're the only one who will never order me about. Apple watched my face, his sweet, empty eyes staring into mine, his lips curled into a smile. The wedding was held in the old castle. Mum Olga wanted it to take place in our manor, but Father said the castle would be more romantic. Against such an argument, she had no weapons. When we arrived, Father went in straight away to see the details of the ceremony and of the masked ball that would follow. I slipped into the garden to visit the candle trees, which, devoid of their leaves, resembled rows of skeletal arms bent at the elbow. The day was cold. I passed the candles and marched up and down an avenue of elms, trying not to freeze. I even tied on my mask in a vain attempt to keep my nose warm. No matter how cold I felt, I was going to stay outside until several guests had arrived. My toes and fingers were numb before I deemed it safe to enter. As soon as I did, Hattie rushed at me, her new false tresses bouncing. "Ella, I've missed you so!" She was about to embrace me and, I warrant, whisper a command in my ear. I stepped away. "If you speak to me at all today, Hattie," I hissed, "I'll snatch off your wig and pass it around to the guests." But not a word. Taking off my cloak, I walked to the fire and remained there while the buzz of conversation grew behind me. There was nothing to tempt me to turn. The flames were more interesting than the talk. I wondered what made the air in front of the fire shimmer so. "Aren't you going to watch the wedding?" Olive knocked my arm. "Can I stay out here with you?" The hall was silent. I said, "Don't you want to see your mother wed?" I wanted to be there to see the horrible event. "I don't care. I'd rather be with you." "I'm going in." She followed me, and we slipped into the last row of seats. Father and Mum Olga faced an alcove in which stood High Chancellor Thomas, who had begun to marry them. His speech sounded familiar because he'd used almost the same phrases at Mother's funeral. The audience probably could have recited along with him. I heard coughs. A lady ahead of me snored gently, and Olive was soon asleep as well. A man in our row pulled out a knife and cleaned his fingernails. Only one viewer was rapt, leaning forward in her seat, nodding at each trite sentiment, smiling while dabbling at wet eyes. I smelled lilacs. Lucinda! She mustn't see me. As the daughter of the groom, I could hardly keep up the pretense that I spoke only Eorthian. She would be livid that I'd fooled her. I put on my mask. I would leave in the confusion of congratulations when the ceremony ended. I watched her, ready to duck if she turned my way. As soon as Sir Thomas concluded, Lucinda leapt to her feet. "My friends," she rang out while advancing on Father and Mum Olga, "never have I been so moved by a ceremony." Sir Thomas beamed. "Not because of this man's endless droning," there were titters, "but because of the love that has united these two, who are no longer in their first youth." "Madam," Mum Olga began. Lucinda didn't hear her. "I am Lucinda, the fairy, and I am going to give you the most wondrous gift." Mum Olga's voice changed from outrage to delight. "A fairy gift? And everyone here to see? Oh, Sir P, how divine!" I should have been making my escape, but I stood frozen in place. Father bowed. "You honor us." "It's the loveliest gift. No one can say this one is harmful or foolish." She shook her head defiantly. "It's eternal love. As long as you live, you shall love each other." And that's the end of chapter 20. So, yeah, that's finally the spoiler that I've been giving you all along, that Dame Olga is the evil stepmother, is there it is. So, yeah, I this section is more like kind of like setting things up, I think, that are about to sort of happen. But I am very excited for what comes next. I'm excited to read you probably, I'm thinking 5 more chapters next week, all entirely new for next week. So that's exciting. And that's it. So I will talk to you next week. Bye.
Find a fine time to shine a little vice and another in the bottom of the down. Stand down, then I'm in the vice. Ding down, then I'm in the bottom. Hey! Touch sound, then I'm in the bottom of the night at the bar. Now, then I'm in the bottom of the night. Touch sound, then I'm in the bottom of the bottom of the night. And the fire Dixie, no. It's way too broad. I'm trying to say.